All right, so let's dive into electoral systems. Those rules that kind of like decide how votes translate into power.
Hmm.
We're going global today, exploring how different countries tackle this,
Yeah.
using CED and the Wapples textbook to guide us,
Right.
and get ready for some surprises because it's not all as straightforward as you might think.
It's fascinating how different countries have such a diverse range of approaches when it comes to translating votes into representation.
Yeah.
I mean, it really highlights the fact that while we think of elections as this kind of universal concept,
Right.
the actual methods vary tremendously. And understanding these systems is key to understanding how power truly functions within a society.
So before we globetrot, let's define electoral system. Basically, it's the rule book for how a country runs its elections.
Yeah.
But here's a thought. In almost every election worldwide,
Hmm.
you're voting for a person, not a specific policy.
That's a great point.
It makes you realize those candidates are really important, right?
Yes.
They're the ones making those policy decisions once elected.
And that's why understanding the electoral system is so crucial.
Yeah.
It's the link between your vote and the actual policies that impact your life.
Yeah.
It's like choosing a driver. You want to make sure they'll take you where you want to go.
Okay, so let's start with electing like a president or prime minister.
Right.
The executive branch. We've got two main ways to do this directly. Plurality and two-round systems.
Right. In a plurality system, like in Mexico, the candidate with the most votes wins,
Okay.
even if it's not a majority.
Mhm.
So imagine a race where someone wins with only 35% of the vote because the other 65% was split amongst multiple candidates.
That seems like it could lead to a leader without a very strong mandate.
Yeah,
Is that a problem?
it can be.
Mm.
It might mean the leader doesn't have widespread support, which can make it difficult to push through their agenda.
Okay.
Now, a two-round system aims to solve that.
Right.
If no one gets a majority in the first round, the top two contenders have a runoff. We see this in Russia, Nigeria, and Iran.
So that second round is like a check to make
Yeah.
sure the winner has broader backing from the voters.
All right.
Makes sense. But wouldn't that make elections more drawn out and expensive?
It does add another layer to the process,
Mm-hmm.
but many argue that it leads to a greater sense of legitimacy and stability,
Okay.
with the winner having a clearer mandate to govern.
Okay, so we've tackled the executive branch.
Yeah.
But what about the legislature?
Uh-huh.
That's where things get really interesting with systems like single-member districts and proportional representation.
And these systems really highlight how different countries prioritize different aspects of representation.
Yeah, let's start with single-member districts, or SMDs.
Okay.
Imagine your country is divided into districts, and each district gets one representative.
Mm.
Like slices of a pie. The UK's House of Commons is a classic example.
The UK uses a first-past-the-post system, or FPTP, within those districts.
Okay.
Picture it like a horse race. Whoever gets the most votes in a district wins. Even if it's not a majority, this can lead to some interesting outcomes.
Yeah.
For instance, in the 2019 UK election, the Conservative Party won 56% of the seats, despite only getting 43.6% of the total votes cast.
Wow, that's quite a difference.
Okay,
I see how that can happen if several candidates split the votes in each district.
exactly.
But wouldn't that discourage people from voting if they feel like their vote won't matter?
Yeah,
Especially if they support a smaller party that's unlikely to win a district outright.
you've hit on one of the main criticisms of SMDs, the issue of wasted votes.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine a district where 100 people vote.
Okay.
Candidate A gets 40 votes,
Yeah.
candidate B gets 35, and candidate C gets 25.
Okay.
Candidate A wins.
Right.
But 60 people voted for someone else.
Hmm.
Those 60 votes don't contribute to the overall makeup of the legislature, potentially leading to a legislature that doesn't accurately reflect the diversity of viewpoints in the electorate. And yes, it can contribute to lower voter turnout.
So what's the alternative?
Let's look at proportional representation, or PR. Here, think of the entire country as the pie. The number of seats each party gets in the legislature is based on the percentage of votes they win nationwide.
Okay.
So if a party gets 30% of the votes, they get roughly 30% of the seats.
So it's more about making sure the legislature mirrors the overall voter preferences.
Right.
That sounds pretty fair.
It aims for a more accurate reflection of the electorate,
Right.
which often leads to higher voter turnout.
Okay.
People feel their vote is more likely to actually count toward the final outcome. However, there are trade-offs.
What kind of trade-offs?
Well, with PR, you often vote for a party, not a specific individual.
Okay.
So that direct connection to your representative
Yeah,
like in an SMD system, can be weaker.
right.
And coalition governments, common in PR systems, can be less stable since they require multiple parties to work together.
Hmm.
Think of it like a group project. Sometimes it's smooth sailing, and other times it's pure chaos.
So it's a trade-off between accuracy of representation and maybe some potential for instability in the government.
Exactly. And there's also the concern that small, even extremist parties
Okay.
can gain more influence under PR systems.
Mm.
If they're needed to form a coalition, their bargaining power can be significant.
Okay, so we've got these two very different approaches.
Yeah.
SMDs emphasizing local representation
Hmm.
and PR aiming for a more accurate reflection of overall voter preferences.
Right. And some countries trying to find a middle ground use mixed systems
Mm.
that combine elements of both.
Okay.
They're like trying to get the best of both worlds.
That sounds intriguing. So in a mixed system,
Yeah.
would you vote for both an individual and a party?
Exactly. You cast 2 ballots, one for a person in your local district and one for a party.
Okay.
Mexico and Russia are good examples of this approach.
Mm.
But it's not a perfect solution, while mixed systems aim to balance local representation with a broader range of viewpoints.
Yeah.
The SMD component can still give larger parties an advantage.
It's fascinating how different countries try to balance those different values and priorities.
Yep.
No system seems perfect, but they all have their own pros and cons.
And those choices, those trade-offs, have a real impact on how those countries function,
Right.
on whose voices are heard, and on how power is distributed.
Okay, so now that we've got a handle on the major types of electoral systems, let's see how these play out in practice around the world. We're back at diving deeper into the world of electoral systems. It's amazing how these systems, often hidden in the fine print of government, can have such a massive impact on the political landscape.
They really are. The building blocks of democracy,
Yeah.
and the choices made in designing them can really shape a nation's destiny.
Yeah.
We've talked about those broad categories: plurality,
Mm.
two-round systems, single-member districts, proportional representation, and mixed systems.
Right.
But what's so captivating is that within each of these categories, there's so much variation,
Yeah.
so many nuances that make each country's approach truly unique.
It's like those house rules you might add to a board game, right? You tweak things.
Yeah.
To make it more fair, more interesting, or to achieve a specific goal, we saw that with those reserved seats for religious minorities in Iran
Right.
and Mexico's gender quotas.
Precisely. Those are prime examples of how countries tailor their electoral systems to address specific societal goals. But it's crucial to remember that even well-intentioned tweaks can have unintended consequences.
So designing an electoral system isn't a one-time thing. It requires constant evaluation and adjustments to ensure it's serving its intended purpose.
And that purpose can shift over time as a country's political landscape changes. Think about how Russia has modified its electoral system in recent years,
Right.
centralizing power around a dominant party, much like Mexico did in the 20th century with the PRI.
It reminds us that these systems aren't static. They're constantly being shaped and reshaped by political forces and historical events.
And that's why it's so vital for citizens to be informed and engaged,
Right.
Understanding how the system works is the first step towards demanding accountability
Oh.
and pushing for reforms that better align with the society's values.
Okay, so we've explored how different systems impact representation,
Yeah.
but what about their effects on how a government actually functions? Do different electoral systems lead to different styles of governance?
Absolutely. The type of electoral system a country uses can have a tremendous impact on the stability of its government, its capacity to pass legislation effectively, and even the tops of policies that get prioritized. It's not just about who gets elected, it's about how they govern once in office.
So some systems might be better at producing stable governments,
Right.
while others might be more prone to gridlock or instability.
Exactly. Let's consider those PR systems we discussed.
Okay.
With their multi-party legislatures and coalition governments, they can sometimes lead to more fragile political landscapes.
Like trying to herd cats.
Okay.
Getting everyone to agree on a direction can be quite the challenge.
A very apt analogy.
Right.
But it's important to remember that this complexity also has its advantages.
Right.
The need for compromise and moderation in a coalition government can prevent extreme policies from taking hold.
Okay.
Different parties have to negotiate and find common ground, which can lead to more balanced outcomes.
So with PR, it's a balancing act between the potential for instability and the benefits of broader representation and moderation.
Right.
What about SMDs? How do they typically impact governance?
Well, SMDs, with their tendency towards two-party systems,
Hmm.
are often lauded for their efficiency in passing laws, with fewer parties vying for control.
Right.
There's often less need for negotiation and compromise.
Hmm.
However, this streamlined decision-making can come at the cost of representing the full spectrum of viewpoints in a society.
It seems like there's a recurring theme here, trade-offs.
Yeah.
No electoral system is perfect, and
Yeah.
each one prioritizes different values.
Precisely. It's about weighing the importance of stability, representation, efficiency, and other factors. There's no one-size-fits-all solution.
Right.
The best system depends on a society-specific context,
Hmm.
its history, its political culture, and the goals it prioritizes.
Okay, we've seen how these systems affect representation and governance, even stability.
Yeah.
But how does this all impact the average voter? Does the choice of electoral system affect how people experience democracy?
That's a crucial question.
Mm?
After all these systems are designed to translate the will of the people into political action,
Yeah.
one of the most noticeable impacts is on voter turnout.
Okay.
Systems that foster a stronger sense of representation,
Hmm.
like those using proportional representation, tend to see higher voter turnout.
Because people feel like their vote actually counts.
Exactly.
They're not just tossing a coin. They're
Right.
participating in a system that genuinely reflects their views.
Exactly. And conversely, in systems where a large portion of the electorate feels like their vote is wasted turnout can suffer.
Right.
It's like playing a game where, the outcome is already decided. Why bother?
That makes sense. If you don't believe your vote matters, you're less likely to participate.
Yeah.
It can lead to a sense of apathy and disengagement, which can undermine the very foundations of a democracy.
Another vital aspect is the level of trust in the system. If people believe the system is rigged or that their vote won't be counted fairly,
Yeah.
they're less likely to engage in the political process.
Right.
This erosion of trust can create a vicious cycle, leading to further disengagement and apathy.
So electoral systems aren't just about mechanics.
Right.
They're about shaping perceptions,
Yeah.
fostering trust, and ultimately determining whether people feel empowered to participate in their democracy.
Precisely. And when people feel like their voices are heard,
Yeah.
when they believe the system is responsive to their needs and concerns, it can cultivate a sense of ownership and civic pride.
It's like the difference between being a passenger and being a driver.
Yeah.
When you have a say in where you're going, you're far more invested in the journey.
And that's the core of what we're talking about, empowering individuals to shape their own destinies.
Right.
Through active participation in a democratic system
Yeah.
that genuinely reflects their will.
Okay, before we head into the final part of this deep dive, let's take a moment to reflect on what we've learned so far. Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into the world of electoral systems.
We've journeyed through the mechanics of how votes translate into power. We've seen these real-world examples of how different countries approach this.
Right.
And we've really kind of explored the pros and cons of each approach. Now it's time to tackle the big question, the one that's probably on everyone's mind.
Yeah. What does all of this mean for the future of democracy itself?
It's easy to get lost in the weeds, in the mechanics of electoral systems. But ultimately, they're just tools, right? The goal is to create a government that truly represents the people, protects their rights, and really aims to build a fair and just society.
So as we look ahead, what challenges and opportunities do democracies face, and how do electoral systems fit into that picture?
Well, one of the most pressing challenges I think we're seeing is this rise of populism.
Yeah.
And the erosion of trust in democratic institutions. We see politicians exploiting divisions and undermining faith in the very systems that are meant to serve the people.
It feels like some politicians are playing a different game altogether.
Right.
One where the rules are constantly changing and the truth is up for grabs.
Electoral systems can either fuel those fires or help put them out. Systems that create extreme polarization, like winner-take-all scenarios, can play right into the hands of those who thrive on division.
Because when it's all about winning at any cost, compromise and collaboration go out the window.
Exactly. Those high-stakes, all-or-nothing situations, they breed division, and they really undermine that spirit of compromise that's so essential for a healthy democracy. On the other hand, systems that encourage broader representation and more collaboration can help bridge those divides.
So proportional representation with its emphasis on coalition building could be a potential antidote to the rise of populism.
Potentially, it offers a way for more voices to be heard, creating a space for dialogue and negotiation rather than just shouting matches.
That makes sense. It's about finding ways to kind of lower the temperature and encourage a more inclusive and collaborative political culture.
But it's not just about choosing the right system, right?
Mhm.
It's about continuously adapting and reforming those systems to meet the evolving challenges that democracies face.
Yeah.
We need transparency, accountability, and a willingness to experiment with new approaches.
It's like tending a garden. You have
Yeah.
to weed out the harmful elements, nurture the beneficial ones, and adjust to the changing seasons.
A perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And just like a garden, a democracy needs constant care and attention if it's going to thrive.
Now, another huge challenge we're facing is the rapid pace of technological change.
Right.
Social media, AI, big data, they're all reshaping the political landscape in ways we're still trying to grasp.
And electoral systems need to adapt to this new reality. How do we ensure the integrity of online voting? How do we combat the spread of misinformation? These are crucial questions that demand our attention.
It feels like we're in uncharted territory. We need to rewrite the rules of the game to ensure fairness and transparency in this digital age.
Absolutely. And that requires a more tech-savvy, citizenry people who can navigate the complexities of this digital world and hold those in power accountable.
So we've talked about the challenges. Where do you see opportunities for positive change? What makes you optimistic about the future of democracy?
One thing that makes me optimistic is this growing movement toward more participatory forms of democracy.
Hmm.
It's about taking democracy beyond the ballot box and giving citizens more direct input into the decisions that affect their lives.
So instead of just voting every few years, citizens would have a more ongoing role in shaping their communities.
Exactly. We're seeing these experiments with citizen assemblies, deliberative polling, participatory budgeting.
Right.
These are really innovative ways to empower people and make their voices heard.
And technology can be a powerful tool here,
Oh, absolutely.
connecting people and facilitating collaboration in these new and exciting ways.
Imagine a world where citizens have real-time input on how their tax dollars are spent, or where they can directly contribute to drafting legislation. It's a powerful vision, and one that's becoming increasingly achievable with the tools we have today.
But it's not just about technology, right?
No way.
It's about a fundamental shift in how we think about democracy, moving away from this idea that it's a once every few years event.
Democracy is an ongoing process. It's a conversation that requires constant engagement and participation from all of us.
And that's where you come in because ultimately the future of democracy rests in your hands.
Imagine you had the power to design the ideal electoral system for your country. What would it look like? What would be your top priorities? Stability, representation, efficiency, something else entirely?
There's no one right answer.
Exactly.
But that's the beauty of democracy. It's a work in progress, a constant experiment in self-governance.
So go forth armed with the knowledge you've gained, be the
Mhm.
change you want to see, engage in thoughtful discussions, challenge the status quo, and demand more from your leaders.
Because the future of democracy really is in your hands. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into electoral systems around the world.
Keep learning, keep questioning, and keep pushing for a better world until next time.